first question, which basically takes us back to your academic years in Mumbai, starting in the year of 1981, I believe. So can you tell us a little bit about your college years in Bombay, how it was like studying, how it was like to study in Bombay in those years, and what eventually led you to what you are currently doing?
Sure. 80s were a different period. It had its own charm. Now, of course, it also has its own charm. Those were the years in US, they were called, that generation was called the baby boomers, Gen X. I was part of Gen X. It was a different world. There was no digital interface. It was an analog world. It was less complicated in a sense because of, I think today is far interesting in that sense. More analog. Yes, there was a deep sense of in college wanting to acquire knowledge. The only source of knowledge was what teachers taught you, and at best when you went to library. We didn't have Google, unfortunately, at that time. I would have learned far more if Google was available. So knowledge seeking was the main thing in those days. And of course, I have made lifelong friends from college days. I am still in touch with a lot of them. I guess that's combination of analog world, a combination of a spirit of Gen X, and combination of fact that knowledge was always through a physical format. So you had to go to college to learn. You had to go to college to socialize. There wasn't any digital socializing available. So all of this led to a very different world. May sound slightly different from today's time, but yes, it has its own charm. And I wish today I was in college, it would have been different.
Yes, definitely. I mean, students going to college in these years is very different, especially because today with the pandemic scenarios, kids studying online. At that point of time, of course, we could not have imagined that we'd see the digital infrastructure seeping into education in the 1980s.
True.
Later in 1990, you also helmed CA Technologies as the managing director. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience there, your role there, your times basically spent at CA Technologies?
It was great fun being the #1 employee, which at that point of time was the world's third largest software company with turnover of roughly $4 or $5 billion. How no one gets this opportunity, and how did I get that? I was actually a consultant, consulting foreign companies coming into India, and CA was my client for around a year and a half. And I met the CEO of CA to make him a presentation on India strategy, and he said, "Sounds good, implement it." I was taken aback. I didn't apply for the job. They have kind of asked me, yes, if you build the strategy, implement it. And that's how I switched from a profession which obviously had become quite interesting to working with CA as employee #1 to build CA in India from scratch. It was great fun. I was with CA for almost 13 or 14 years, and it was great to see from zero. CA eventually had a development center, and its software was in their space leading software. So the excitement of working in a large multinational company with its processes and globally known products, and starting that from scratch in India, it's just unparalleled. One never gets this experience again ever. And then to learn about technology, then to learn about what CA does, and meet CEOs, CIOs was great fun. I think those days can't come back again, because you can't have employee #1 of a large company, multinational again. The beauty was to build the market for enterprise software from scratch in India, position it, and ensure that CA becomes a leading provider in the enterprise software space.
You also spent around 12 years as the CEO and MD at Aptech. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience there and eventually what led you to join the Indian venture capital market? I mean, as we all know that you're currently the senior partner at 100x. So what led you to do this transition and eventually join the Indian venture capital market?
Sure. So I was CEO of Aptech for roughly, I think roughly 7 years. I am still a director there. I'm on the board of Aptech. But yes, I was CEO for roughly 7 years. Just give me 1 minute. Yeah, so I was CEO for 7 years. Aptech is in the education space. It's a listed company. And I thought after technology, let me get experience of a space which is really growing fast. And Aptech is an old brand name. But the beauty of what I did in the 7 years is we went to a lot of emerging countries outside India. To build an Indian brand in the consumer space in India and emerging countries outside India was a massive challenge. And that's what I did. I took a bet on the industry, which is basically education. I said this is going to grow very rapidly, private education. I took a bet on the fact that it's going to grow rapidly in the emerging countries as well. And on that basis, I joined Aptech. It was an existing company, very different experience from Computer Associates. It was a listed company, listed in the Indian stock market. So again, a very, very different experience. But it was so amazing to see the transformation of a company which when I joined was loss making to then when I left, I'm still on the board, but of course not in an executive position. When I left as a CEO, to see it a profitable company with so many centers across the world, taking the flag of Indian consumer. So that was great fun handling that. And I still believe in the education sector, there's a lot more which can happen and which will happen from India. There's a lot more potential in the education sector. And after that, of course, I have joined the VC industry. So maybe we can chat about that a little later.
Yes, definitely. So I mean, there's something that we very specifically wanted to ask you, especially since we were just discussing about education and with the entire impact of that the pandemic has brought on the education sector, especially the edtech sector. So how are you looking at maybe the growth of the edtech sector or the transition of the education sector at the moment? Because a lot of offline institutes are currently adapting its digital infrastructure in the country, and edtech has been growing. So what is your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I know after working in a large multinational, after being a consultant, after being in a listed education company in India, I thought the best way to channelize my all that I've learned, the culmination I thought would happen in a VC industry, because that everything comes together. When you apply all these things which I've done as operating manager, strategic thinking, all of that, VC I thought was the best way to apply my thought, and that's why I joined the VC industry. I think we have to be really proud that the world's largest valued edtech startup is from India. Byju's is the largest valued in the world, and if that is one indication of the fact that we have the population of India, the number of kids who are in the education space are huge. Of course, lesser than China, but certainly a very, very large number, 200 million plus. And these children want a good quality education at their location, at their price. And that's the challenge which EdTech can solve. Physical space, between the private sector and the government sector, in the physical models, yes, there has been massive progress. There's the reach in villages. But the issue is of quality. The issue is young girls and boys are no longer just interested in some education. They are interested in world-class education, again, at their location, at their price. And I think each one has its place. I'm not saying physical schools and colleges don't have their place. They do have their spot under the sun, and they will continue to play a huge role. But to ensure that this aspect of kids is fulfilled, this aspiration is fulfilled, technology can play a huge role. and EdTech can play a huge role. So global quality education can be given at the doorsteps at a price point which you as a student will afford, want to consume, and be happy to get at your doorstep, at your home, at the price point you want. That is possibly not possible in the physical format. So EdTech has got massive scope. I think just the number of students in India, just the fact that there's so much diversity in terms of infrastructure, just the fact that there, good quality is not necessarily available easily in terms of the education imparted. It's not easy at all. So all of it is put together. EdTech has a key role to play in imparting good global quality education in India.
I think we'd also want to discuss a little bit on when did venture capital first start making its footings in the technology industry. I mean, of course, we know that you've been working in the industry for over 3 decades now. So if you could tell us a little bit, maybe around 1980s or 1990s, when was venture capitalists first stepping towards the tech industry of India?
So in 80s, the tech industry in India was tiny. $100 million. We virtually knew all the CEOs by first names. We could connect. NASSCOM was just got formed. Today, the tech industry in India, software industry is massive. Touching around $200 billion revenue. That a little less than that, and 8% of India's GDP. Who could have thought that from 90s? Actually, the big turning point was 1991 liberalization. After that, the software industry in India really took off. And today it's a massive industry. So those early days was, one could quickly network with the leading people in the industry, and one knew everyone by the first name. It is different now, and it's great. It is continue to grow at a rapid pace. In 1990s, VC industry was in the baby steps. They were not as robust as it is now. Even now in India, VC industry is, I would not say nascent, but yes, it is mature, but still a long way to go. There's a lot of scope for the VC industry to grow. By its definition, VC industry embraces technology rapidly. VC industry loves startups which scale rapidly. VCs love startups which embrace technology and have a global scale. So by definition, tech companies get a lot of attention from VC, and VCs love tech industry. But yes, we have a long way to go, and I think this is, I would say, not the beginning, if not chapter 1, maybe chapter 3 or 4.
You had earlier also mentioned that India can be a laboratory for fintech startups. So can you tell us a little bit about that? We were also discussing about the same the other day. So if you could share your comments on that.
I strongly believe, if you have some knowledge, I would urge entrepreneurs and even VCs to look at this very, very minutely. There are tons of opportunities. If you are a startup founder wanting to do a startup, just look out of the window, see how the fintech, how the financial services industry, there are so many friction points. Customer wants smooth transactions, less friction points, and technology and fintech can solve many of its problems. Today, look at just UPI. I believe they're doing some billions of dollars of transactions every day from zero within a matter of just less than 2 years. We have a unique combination of UPI, Jan Dhan accounts, and of course the mobile phones. This trinity, as they call, no other country in the world has, no one. We have massive number of people who are still unbanked. We have people who are really have a lot of banking accounts, but want friction-free transaction. They are not interested in going to physical space. We have MSMEs, the micro companies are huge, 65 million total. They have deep financial needs, and they're not interested in applying for reams of paper after bank loan. Students want collateral-free loans. You look at the US situation. Students don't have to provide collaterals to get education. if you are a good student, a very, very good student, and if you want to go to the best institute in India, you should be able to get a loan without collateral. So you name every journey, every path of a person living in India, the financial needs have to be met. And there's no other country in the world with the kind of a depth and the width and the breadth of the problems which are facing the financial sector, the friction on each part of the transaction which need to be resolved, and in there lies an opportunity. Founders of startups find the opportunity where we see a problem. Founders of startups look at solutions where others see problems. And there are a lot of solutions to be found in the fintech industry. I have no doubt in my mind, we will have the world's best fintechs, not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of quality as well in the coming years from India.
I have another sector-specific question before we go back to your journey as a professional. So recently, the cryptocurrency industry has been going through a few changes. The pricing has been very dynamic. A lot of people have started to invest in the cryptocurrency industry, even in India. So how are you looking at the growth of this sector specifically in India, maybe in the next 5 to 7 years?
So we all await for government regulations to come and government views on cryptocurrency. And of course, there have been some indications that there would be some regulation. But broadly speaking, I think if you go a level higher, blockchain as a technology has got enormous potential. And that is something which can be harnessed very effectively in the financial services sector. Crypto is one part of blockchain. There are a lot of people, from the statistics I read, a lot of people in India investing in crypto. On the other side, we have fiat currencies, which are government directed currencies, which we are all used to. And then these are currencies which do not have any central authority controlling. So the concept of decentralization, not just of currency, but in other aspects, and the concept of blockchain as a combination is going to see many more applications in the coming times to come. Crypto is just one of the applications which is part of this overall framework of blockchain and decentralization. It's no authority. Can it apply in other spaces? I don't know. There are startup people trying to figure out if all of this can apply. Crypto in one of those verticals, if it is regulated by government, we'll have to wait and see how the government comes up with the regulations.
You were also a part of CII in India, where you were leading the Western region of the Confederation of the Indian Industry. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience of the organization?
It was quite a fascinating experience. Yeah, it's not possible to kind of describe in words. You're the face for Western region for the industry, and you have to put forward the industry's views, keep a balance. I think it gives you deep knowledge of policy advocacy. It gives you deep insights on how policymakers think, how they decide, and how, as an industry, you have to work in a collaborative manner with the policymakers to figure out what's best for the industry. When you're outside of it, you sometimes wonder, oh, why can't this happen? Why is this permission taking time? What is this? Why is electricity cost so much? But when you're part of this dialogue with the government, when you're part of this whole aspect, it gives you a very different feel. More interestingly, you're dealing with such macro level issues and dealing with such CEOs of large companies and policymakers. It really gives you a very different insight. And all of that put together, that's why I said in the beginning, the reason I became a VC is it's a culmination of all of that, which I've learned over the years, which is best applied, I felt, in a VC. As a VC, I can best apply all this what I've gathered over the number of years.
Can you share any specific project that you had to undertake from CII?
So I I was and I'm still fond of connecting with students. Those were the days of physical format. So wherever I went for CI visits, I made it a point to ensure that I at least go to one or two colleges in that region. Whether I went to Kolhapur, whether I went to Indore, Goa, Panjim, or in Gujarat, Surat. And I was so passionate about connecting with students because I felt it starts there. Their inclination of becoming entrepreneurs, their inclination of wanting to connect with business, with government, you have to start seeding it there. I had started a program called, it's still going on, called India We Want. It was a competition for students, and we get massive response. They have to send ideas of the India they want, and it's fascinating, across India. So a student connect was something which I was very passionate. I did a lot of effort on that, and it has seen results. Between the government, industry, and the students in this triangle, I thought students were not as connected, and I made it a point to connect with them.
As we know, like very extensively, you have worked with young entrepreneurs, the Gen X generation, specifically focusing on the tech industry. So, can you tell us maybe a little bit about what would be the impact or the role of technology in the post-pandemic market? Because as we have seen that technology has been an industry which has continued to thrive, and it was very quick to adapt during the pandemic. It brought in new services, adapted facilities. So can you tell us maybe a little bit about your thoughts on it?
So if you're a technology lover, a technology buff, there is no better time. It's unfortunate we had a pandemic, and I hope all of you are safe and well. But what it has done is it has brought technology mainstream from being something on the side. Just look at education. Overall as a sector, of course, there are some bright spots, but overall as a sector, it was not as forthcoming in embracing technology. Now there's no choice. Across the region, MSMEs, they were not as forthcoming, but today, whether it is they want something to ensure that smooth flow of operation, their payments mechanism, all of it, they are embracing it. Consumers are ordering more and more stuff on their mobile phone than ever before. So put together, whether it's consumption which has increased because of technology, the people in between who are providing this technology, all of it put together presents an enormous opportunity for startups wanting to be in this space. If you're a technology provider, massive opportunity. If you are wanting to reach out to the consumers, today you can reach out directly to the consumer. Direct to consumer model has grown enormously. If you are, let's say, in one of these banking, insurance, education, any of the spaces, it is become so many options are available to you. So across the space, the impact post-COVID, and hope this post-COVID happens very, very soon, and I hope it will happen soon. Post-COVID, the impact of technology across a wide spectrum, from consumption, productions to provision of technology, is going to be massive. We are just in the beginning. India will see a massive explosion of it. The beauty is India is virtually leapfrogging. We have mobile phones, so instead of having desktops on which you use the technology to consume and interact, we have got large number of mobile phones. So India is leapfrogging, and I think it only presents a lot of opportunities, not only for VCs, but for tech-related co-founders.
You had also authored a book, Born to Baba, which is on strategy and management consulting, woven with lessons from James Bond movies, Formula One, Kabaddi, and much more. So can you tell us maybe a little bit about the book and probably share a few lessons that you've mentioned in the book?
Yeah, so thanks. This book was in making for 7 years, and I wrote roughly 120 pages. So my younger son told me, "Dad, that's a poor record. 120 pages over 7 years, but it's a distillation of all my thoughts. I do hope you and your viewers read it. I've started with the first chapter of how the character of Bond was reinvented by Skyfall. It actually started when Skyfall was released, the Bond movie, where I suddenly noticed the Bond character was totally reinvented. I was fascinated and it became a huge success. And then I've been reading a lot. I've written about Alexander the Great's war strategies. I follow Formula One racing very seriously. There's so much strategy in it. When you see today also, when you see a F1 race and you see a car coming to a pit stop and all four tires being changed in roughly 2 seconds, it is massive amount of thought and strategy and technology in that. How do you apply all of this to business? Of course, the last chapter is on Ramdev Baba and how he's made a commercial success. So there are various aspects of it. I just thought I'll apply to and put it forth in the book. Fortunately, I got a good response. It was on Amazon's memorable books last year, and it's done well. But more than anything else, I just wanted to give my thoughts and share it with the world. And in a lot of MBA colleges, they are using it as a guide. A lot of managers are using it as a guide to learn about strategies.
So as we know that you've also been a part of many Marathi plays in Mumbai. You've also produced many Marathi plays in Bombay. So can you tell us maybe a little bit about that? Have you been a theatre artist yourself, even in the past? It would be great if you can share your thoughts on that.
No, I have not been a theatre artist, but I have great admiration to actors, and particularly theatre actors. I think it's a very tough profession. They do a great job. And I think probably part of that made me reflect that how do I support theatre? I really believe whichever city you are in, you should support a local art, local theatre format. You could be in any city, but go to that local and just support it. It requires your support, and support does not mean money. It just means time. Time means you go and watch it. That's it. That's enough to support it. And I was deeply passionate about wanting to support. And I said supporting, I wanted to be a little more proactive in supporting. So I am a co-producer of 2 Marathi plays. The first one is called A Perfect Murder, and second one Maharati. A Perfect Murder has done close to 190 shows. Of course, now it is stopped because of COVID. But it is deeply I was passionate about supporting local art or theatre, and I found theatre to be very satisfying. So it's a weekend profession for me. Weekdays is VC, and weekend I'm totally busy when shows are on, going to various places. It's fascinating to see from an idea, a story which you hear, to eventually it coming on stage and audience coming and appreciating it and me supporting that. It's quite a fascinating process. So it's just a passion to support, which I'm supporting.
So 100x, as we know, it has invested in close to around 50 startups from India. It is backing startups from various sectors within the country, has been focusing very proactively on its growth, on its scaling. So can you tell us maybe a little bit about the factors based on which maybe VCs are selecting startups in India today?
Sure. 100x has a unique model. We fund early stage startups. It could be pre-seed, pre-revenue, seed stage, or even early revenues. And we invest through something called the iSafe note, India's simple agreement for future equity. So there's no need for valuation discussion, no need for shareholders agreement. It has really changed the way VCs invest at this stage. We have actually open sourced the iSafe note. It's on our website, so anyone can use it. We have localized it to India and open sourced it. Because of iSafe, we can actually do deals fast. There are some instances, not all, where we like to deal in the morning. We've had a discussion with founder, and by evening you're signed off. It can never happen this so fast. Your typical shareholders agreement, others takes a couple of months. So one is speed, because it's important. You know, for a founder to be told yes, we like your company, and then to receive money after 5 months, 6 months is very, very tough. But our thing is speed. But more importantly, how do you ensure success? It's very tough. Anisha, we see business at our stage is 1% success business, and we hope that 1% happens in our portfolio. When I say 1%, means we hope that 1%, 1 out of 100 become a unicorn, hopefully, touch wood. But yes, that's how it is. The important thing to look for, of course, is the founder, the size of the market, and is she or he, as a founder, capable of scaling business. Idea in a laboratory is very different from an idea on the street, an idea at the national level, and implementation at the global level. It requires different sets of skills, and it's not easy being a founder, but it's a fascinating journey for founders. It is not a journey of income, it's a journey of wealth. And for VCs, it's fascinating to see nurturing. We have nurtured now 50 ideas, we invested in them, and we hope, of course, all of them by law of statistics will not succeed, but we hope at least some of them succeed immensely. What is the secret sauce is what you're asking, and I'll give it to you right now. The secret sauce is in figuring out, is this founder capable of scaling business? Is this founder has a mindset, does the founder have a mindset of thinking big and implementing big? How do you assess that? It's not a science, it is an art. And of course, the important thing is to have some, clairvoyance is a big word, but some way you can forecast the future and see, does this product or service have a large market size? So these are some of the things which we apply before we take an investment decision.
So over the last 30-35 years, you've been in consulting, helped companies grow internationally, joined the venture capital firm, produced Marathi plays, authored a book. So what is next on the cards for Mr. Ninad? Can you maybe share some thoughts on it?
I want to see 100x as the number one player in not just in India, but across the world for early stage investing. So it's a journey, hopefully not too long, but that's what I want to see. And that's what I am at. We are really, really targeting that. Of course, my passion for Marathi theatre will continue. I'll continue to on weekends to support that. There are plenty of ideas floating around, and that will continue. But more importantly now in future, I think applying your knowledge or sharing your knowledge through a digital medium and how it's going to pan out, whereby we're able to reach out to everyone beyond just your immediate periphery and have knowledge thrown to them, not just in a book format, in a different format. All this and more, I'm hoping to explore in the years to come.
That's terrific. We would definitely look forward to the growth. And one final question before we close the interview. So, of course, we know there are lots of young entrepreneurs who will be viewing this interview. So if you could maybe give your comments on how they should look at their roadmap in the initial years of their career, maybe in the first 2 to 5 years of their career, what are the most important things that they should be focusing on?
So here's my bit of advice to young girls and boys. If you have been a 1% inclination to become an entrepreneur, startup founder, don't wait, do it. The world is conspiring to make you successful. It's a fact. You mentioned we were referring earlier to my college days. There were different times. That time the world was not conspiring to make startup entrepreneurs successful. It was exactly the opposite, probably. But now you have the government pushing you, you have incubators, you have people like me funding early stage ideas, concept stage, pre-revenue. It could never have been better. It is all available to you on a platter. You have to think of some idea which you think will make huge sense, which will scale to a big opportunity, and everyone will ensure that they support you to make you successful. Of course, there's a lot of hard work. I mentioned earlier, it's a journey of wealth, not of income. But more importantly, remember, capital is chasing ideas. Today, capital is chasing ideas. It couldn't have been better. Never in the history of in India, capital was chasing ideas. It is now. And if you are young, if you are wanting to do a startup, don't wait. Do it now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Karpik, for joining us today. And I think we've had a very insightful conversation. Will be so many young professionals and also senior entrepreneurs who will be watching this. I'm very sure they'll be finding it very insightful. We look forward to having you back, Earl. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.